All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We've got former NFL safety and Super Bowl champion. We've got Sean Considine. Sean, how's everything going for you?
Doing good, Zach. Just living a small town life now, back in Byron, Illinois, raising 5 kids, and having a lot of fun trying to survive the coronavirus.
What's it like raising 5 kids during a pandemic?
Terrible. Thanks for asking. Now we have triplets that are 9 years old, and good luck trying to keep these kids cooped up in a house, and not being able to do a lot of the activities that we're used to doing. It's we're making the best of it. We're very fortunate. We live on 40 acres, and I actually just got done building a big pond out in front of my house, and we stocked it with rainbow trout. And so we do a lot of stuff outdoors, like to do a little hunting and fishing, and had a lot more time to spend with each other, which in my opinion is not a bad thing. But these kids, they miss their classmates and all the stuff that they would have been doing, without the coronavirus going on. So interesting times, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully we're on the back end of this and we can sort of get back to normal as soon as possible, because this year's been wild. So I want to talk about your high school career for a little bit, because I saw in a recent interview you said that you didn't think you were going to play college football.
Yeah, Byron, Illinois is, we got maybe 5,000 people in this town. That's counting, all the farmers from the countryside around here. And it's a rural community in Illinois. Great place to raise a family, but, not like a football powerhouse by any means. But we did have a great football program, high school football program for our classification here in Illinois. And we had an incredible high school coach, Hall of Famer Everett Stein, one of my mentors to this day. But, it's just not an area where a lot of kids get recruited, and, you can do pretty good at our level. And oftentimes, you're not as good as you think. I mean, we're not playing the biggest, strongest kids there are. So, I had a nice high school career, but I wasn't really sure where I fit in. The recruiting process was a little bit tough. My dad was actually a scholarship player at Northern Illinois University. That's about 35 miles from Byron. They recruited me pretty hard. His position coach while he was there was Joe Novak, and he happened to be the head coach at Northern when I was coming through high school. And I went to their camps and got MVP and all that type of stuff. But, I was still probably looked at like a tweener. I was a linebacker on defense and a running back on offense. And I had a nice high school career. We went 14-0 my senior year and won a state title, and had about the time of my life playing, ball with my best friends since, that I had known since we were little kids. We had a lot of fun, but, there wasn't like a bunch of programs beating down the doors for me. And I tell you, besides Northern, I hardly got recruited by anybody, let alone like Illinois State, Eastern Illinois, none of the Division I AA's, really none of the Division II's.
Really?
We did. I don't know if we were small and didn't really know what we were doing, but, we just assumed that people would find you if you were talented enough. And, I don't know if we kind of dropped the ball there or not, but I did a lot of camps and stuff like that. But I was a 6 foot, 175-pound running back. And I think there was a lot of guys that probably looked like me. And I pretty much knew I'd play defense in college. I was like a prototypical safety, not undersized for a safety with my height, but I wanted to play offense in college. And so I don't know if that put some people off or not, but I was a good high school baseball player too. And I love baseball. And, so things didn't quite go my way in the recruiting process like I would have thought. So I kind of, for a time period, thought maybe I'd just try to play college baseball. And that recruiting cycle and process was very similar to football. It wasn't like a lot of teams were, calling and saying, oh, yeah, we want you. And so late in the process, I went on a very, very late recruiting visit out at the University of Iowa, right when Kirk Ferentz was he had been there 1 year, but they were rebuilding that program from the ground up. And they hadn't had a very good recruiting class, and they were looking for walk-on types. And I didn't go out there until like the end of March. And I was, they offered me a preferred walk-on spot, which meant I would have a spot in training camp the following year. And I met Phil Parker on that visit, and he was very open and honest with me. He's now the defensive coordinator at Iowa, one of the best coaches in the country. But those guys are just straight shooters. And they said, we're going to make you no promises, but if you come out here and work hard and do the things that, we ask you to do, you'll get your shot. And that's all I could ask for. And the rest is kind of history. It's crazy.
That's awesome. So as a walk-on, when did you kind of feel like you didn't have to look over your shoulder anymore? Like, all right, I got the spot.
Never. I mean, shoot, when I got drafted by the Eagles, I mean, I still had that same uneasy feeling like I had to be the first one there, last one to leave. And to be honest with you, pretty much every level I played at, besides high school, I'm not, going to say that football was easy to me at the high school level, but,
I saw an article that said you're the greatest football player in your town's history. So that's very humble.
I don't know. I grew up watching a guy named Adam Dock. He scored like 48 touchdowns his senior year, and he went to Northern Illinois as a running back from our high school and set all the records at Northern. An unbelievable physical athlete at the high school level. I just wasn't physically mature, when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. I had to go and develop, and it's kind of what I did at the University of Iowa. But at the high school level, it just seemed like when we needed a play, you ran a toss sweep and somehow you turned it into a 75-yard touchdown. Don't ask me how. I'm not saying I was the greatest player you ever seen, but then when you go to Iowa and then, the NFL is a whole nother deal. It's just a completely different level. It's a completely different group of athletes. And, I just kind of always got into that mindset where I always felt a little uneasy about my position on the team, that I just had this like anxiety that I had to put more time in, study more film, spend more time in the weight room. And, I really never lost that feeling or that drive until the day I was done playing football. And I pretty much knew my career was coming to an end. I was, 32 years old playing for the Ravens, and, thankfully had a great relationship with John Harbaugh, and it was a good way to go out.
Yeah. So I have a question. So at Iowa, at what point did somebody say to you, like, hey, you have a legit shot at playing in the NFL?
I remember Kirk Ferentz told my parents, I think it was at the junior banquet at the end of the year, the awards banquet, and all the families come into town. And Coach Ferentz shook my parents' hand and, told them that very thankful that I, found Iowa and Iowa found me. And told my dad that he thought I'd play a long time in the NFL. And my dad is like one of the biggest football fans that you've ever met. And he just loves the Green Bay Packers, loves high school football, played football himself. And I think when Coach Ferentz told my dad that, I think it really, even at that point, I don't think I didn't think it was realistic that I'd play in the NFL. I was a walk-on when I went to Iowa. My junior year, I earned the starting job and had a really nice season, but it was, I kind of thought maybe that was about as good as it was going to get.
Yeah.
But I didn't keep, I kept on pushing ahead, and the Eagles drafted me the following year, and awesome. It just kind of snowballed. When I went to training camp, I think that first week I was at Philadelphia, I called my parents. And I'm like, man, if I make it 1 week in this league, I'm doing pretty good. I mean, these guys are next level, and getting to meet and be around a guy like Brian Dawkins, what an experience.
I have a question. What was your draft night like?
Draft night was actually, it was kind of nuts. I would if anybody ever gets drafted, I would recommend not doing what I did. So, I had all my high school buddies obviously in town. We came back to Byron, this little town here, 5,000 people, was just buzzing, thinking that I was going to get drafted. I was projected in the third or fourth round, and back then the first 3 rounds were on day 1, and 4 through 7 were on day 2. And so we set up a big party at the local bar with food and drink at Saturday night. Let's go have a good time. And Chad Greenway and all my college roommates and teammates came out from the University of Iowa, and we had a great time. We golfed that day. It was actually fairly warm in the Midwest. We had a lot of fun, but didn't really think about, well, what if you don't get drafted in the 3rd round and actually get drafted the first pick of the 4th round, which happens to be the next morning. So that was kind of I still had a good time. And like I said, it wasn't my, I didn't have all these expectations of being a first rounder and all that type of stuff. And so, but I would highly recommend just set your draft party on Sunday night when the draft's over, because if it doesn't work out the way you're thinking, at least you're not feeling bad on Saturday night.
So I have a question. It says something I kind of put together. So I saw you were in the same draft as Trent Cole. I actually interviewed Trent a couple months ago. I saw you're a hunter. I know he's a hunter. Do you have any good Trent Cole hunting stories with him?
Oh, we did a lot together when we played together at Philadelphia. And I actually was just texting him. We have a little family farm not far from where we're living here in Illinois. And all my boys are getting into the outdoors. And we've had an incredible deer season this year. So I was sharing a lot of the pictures of what our success we've had out in the woods this year with Trent on Twitter. And he was sending me pictures of a deer and I think he actually shot this deer like while we were talking. You know, he's on Twitter and text messaging. He's a hunting fool. He always has been. I mean, just an incredible athlete. You know, I always respected Trent because, I mean, his motor, his drive when the ball was snapped. I mean, he didn't stop until he heard a whistle, and sometimes maybe a little bit after that. Just he had a great career. You know, I don't talk to him as much as obviously I'd like to, but he's doing his thing. We keep in touch every now and then. You know, when we do see each other, it's like we never, missed any time. But great guy, great outdoorsman.
Yeah, because I remember when I was asking him about like where did you hunt when you got to Philly, he said you can go anywhere, and he said I think he said he went to like around Jersey, and he just had a ball. And I know he was talking about how a lot of times he'd kind of show up like right at the time you guys were supposed to get to morning practice, and he'd be switching all his gear out and putting cleats on, that kind of thing. That was incredible.
He was even probably pushing the limits on, putting a lot of time into the woods and hunting. But South Jersey has incredible outdoor opportunities, not only deer, but turkey hunting. I mean, I had a lot of friends that would come out from the Midwest while I was playing out there for Philadelphia, and we'd do turkey hunting in the spring. And I mean, we had one day, I think we got 5 turkeys in like 2 hours, and we had tags for them all. It was just incredible. There's just a lot of great hunting opportunities in South Jersey.
Yeah. So I have a question. So the Eagles fans can sometimes be eccentric, to put it lightly. Have you ever had any interesting experiences while with the Eagles or before or after with an Eagles fan, or anything interesting?
Yeah, I got a pretty good story. I think it's kind of funny. I mean, that's an understatement. The Eagles fans are tough. I mean, I played at the University of Iowa where, I mean, those people out there are the nicest people you ever met. I mean, Iowa could stink, and they'd shake your hands and want your autograph and tell you how great you were. And, I'm a pretty tough guy, though, and, I don't focus on that type of stuff. I learned really quickly not to listen to sports talk radio, and, some of the guys that were former players that were in the media, they weren't my friend, and I'm fine with that. It's just the way it is. I mean, I get it. Everybody's got to go earn a living, and, you guys got a lot of pressure to talk about the things you talk about and judge, and I get it. But my father-in-law is like a cowboy. I mean, he is from a cattle farm in central Illinois, raises like 500 head of cattle, corn, soybeans. He is not a big city guy at all. My wife gave him a hard time about, never coming to any of my games. And so he jumped on an airplane, which was a big deal for him, and flew out to the Bears Eagles game, because we're from Illinois, and he's kind of not really a Bears fan, but he's going to come to that game. Well, I actually had a really good game going for me, and I scooped up a fumble by Cedric Benson late in the game and ran it down to like the 1 yard line. That was going to seal the game. Well, there was some weird rule back then that the ball was snapped. I don't even know if you remember that game. The ball was snapped and never touched the quarterback, and so they reset the play. The Bears got the ball back. Well, they ended up going down and scoring with not much time left. Well, the guy that caught the ball was Musid Muhammad, and he pretty much caught it right over my back to win the game. Well, my father-in-law had a Considine jersey on, watching the game. And, of course, that play happens at the end of the game. And he was just getting his butt ripped by all these Eagles fans and telling them how terrible, I was, and da-da-da-da-da. So my mother-in-law likes to tell a story. He couldn't take it anymore. He finally took the jersey off and put it in his back pocket. So I give him a hard time about that, but that's the Eagles fans. They love you, but they're going to get on you if they have to. So that's okay. I get it. I respect, different fan bases. We had a great time out in Philadelphia, just getting a chance to be around the guys that were in the locker room at that time, and Andy Reid and Sean McDermott, who I keep in touch with still to this day. Cool. John Harbaugh. I mean, it was just an incredible experience.
Yeah. So what was it like just learning from Brian Dawkins?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to come in as a rookie under a guy like that. As great of a player as he was, I think I learned about as much about life and, how to handle yourself in the locker room and how to be a true professional and a pro and a man of faith and all that type of stuff. Brian just had a way about him of not only, being a leader on the football field, but being a leader in the locker room. He was really big on treating, the rookies with respect. They're one of us, and, no hazing, no heckling the players. A little bit of that goes on at certain programs, but not the Philadelphia Eagles, not with guys like Harbaugh and Andy Reid and Brian Dawkins. We had a really incredible locker room at that time, and that was when T.O. was in there that year. That was his last year there, and so just to kind of see the guys have to deal with that the dynamics of that going on at the same time. I got an eyeful and an earful as a rookie with the Philadelphia Eagles, that's for sure.
Which NFC East team did you look forward to playing the most?
I grew up a Packers fan, and so I kind of always had the admiration or watching the Cowboys. I just heard a lot about them. Packers, Cowboys seem to play every year. Had a good rivalry. But at that time, New York was a strong program, and they had Brandon Jacobs as a running back, and always a big challenge, a big running game, a good quarterback, Eli Manning, young player, and I kind of like those little short trips up to the Meadowlands and a quick rivalry game with somebody like the Giants. The NFC East is just, you can name them all. You go down to Washington, it's just like, it's a little bit different than the other football conferences. Like, I played 2 years in Jacksonville. It was kind of like, well, who's our rival? The Colts. And it wasn't like every one of them, the NFC East, those are all rivals. It's just such a storied conference and great historic football teams. It was a lot of fun.
What have been your thoughts on the division this year?
I'm really shocked. It just seems like the division's really struggled. But with that said, they had a couple big wins over the weekend. I'm right back to rooting for my Green Bay Packers. That's the one thing. I don't know if I'm the same as a lot of other NFL players or not, but I grew up a Packer fan. When I played for the Eagles and the other teams, I love those franchises, and I loved my time there, and I'm loyal to them. And if they ever need anything from me, I'd love to get back to it. But I'm a fan of the Green Bay Packers. That was in my blood, and I'm right back to that. But I do follow the Eagles quite a bit. Have a lot of people around here that just assume I'm a diehard Eagles guy still to this day because I played there the longest. Kind of interesting. It's fun to watch a program, that's 3 years removed for Super Bowl, and same head coach, same quarterback.
No, they just benched him today for Hurts.
Yeah, I know, I saw that. They just played my Packers not too long ago, and just to watch how quickly the momentum and the mentality and the confidence, even at that level with people that talented, how that can change from year to year or go away completely. And, I kind of feel for Carson Wentz and what he's going through, and, the position that Doug Peterson's been put in now to have to make a decision, the contract implications that are going on with that whole decision. I don't think anybody feels good about what's happening. And I don't think it's at all about, he needs to try harder. He needs to put more effort in. I think that's all going on. He's just not playing up to the caliber that he needs to. And, I think the decision was made for him. It was Doug Peterson had to make the decision, and now you got a young guy. Obviously the Eagles were, I'm not saying moving on, but they drafted a guy in the second round for a reason. And, I think it's going to be his opportunity moving forward.
What do you think are you surprised with Wentz's kind of like 180? Do you think, I keep thinking it's the back issue he had a couple years ago. I heard somebody else say maybe it was him watching Foles win a Super Bowl. I've also heard the decimated offensive line and receivers. What do you think it is with him that's making him kind of like not play that well this year?
I don't know. It's really strange. Typically, the one thing that I found out, after playing 8 years in the NFL and all those years at Iowa or high school, is you start picking up experience and learning it's not even shortcuts. It's just the things that you had to think about as a young player, you start doing naturally. You don't even have to think about it. You watch like a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers at his age, 37 years old, and his ability to get rid of the ball when he has to not take hits, to make good decisions. I mean, he's only, there's been a lot of other quarterbacks that have done the same thing, and a lot of other position players do the same thing. When I was at Baltimore, I got to rejoin one of my former teammates at Iowa, Marshall Yanda, and he was really slowing down in his old age, but he was just an all-pro. He was incredible at his craft. He had gotten so efficient and so good at his steps and what he did, and it just over time he built up to the best guard in the NFL. And typically that's what happens. Especially I don't think Carson Wentz is not a smart, coachable, probably putting the time in type of guy. This looks like for whatever reason, he has not taken the next step, and the experience is not benefiting him like it typically does with guys that are as talented as he is. So I don't know what the disconnect is there, but it's kind of surprising. You don't see it often with guys that were at such a high level for them to kind of regress, and it almost kind of seems mental, issues or not making the right decisions. He should be, getting better in those areas. He's not.
It's interesting. So I want to talk about your time in Baltimore. So I saw that you were kind of out of football, and then who called you?
Yeah, Coach Harbaugh. I'd get like a text from him about once a year, and my 7th year of the NFL was the NFL lockout. I was a free agent coming out of Jacksonville after year 6. The NFL lockout hit. I wasn't at that point, I was probably a borderline starter at best, come in and compete for a job and push somebody for a starting job. But then I had really kind of entrenched myself as one of the better special teams players maybe around the league. But thankfully, I'm not playing still because, special teams is not what it used to be. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be able to build an 8-year NFL career, being a kickoff coverage ace or a punt cover guy and all that type of stuff. But that's another story for another day. But so I finished up a strange season in year 7. Sean McDermott got me an opportunity down in Carolina. Ron Rivera was the first-year head coach. They drafted Cam Newton, and I got a call. The NFL lockout broke at midnight on, I forget even what date it was, but right before training camp. And I got a call the next morning that Panthers wanted to bring me into training camp. And me and my wife had just had triplets, July 21st of 2000. I'm busy. Well, I wasn't busy. I was like, hey, I got to go. Time to go to work. And there's a lot of work going on around here. So I didn't want to change any more diapers. So I'm like, I'm going to training camp. But it was just, I don't know if it wasn't a good fit or had too much distractions going on with my family back home, raising, my wife my mom and dad are here. She had plenty of help, but there's a lot going on. It really wasn't, maybe the best fit for me in Carolina. Well, after week 4, I got cut and got picked up. I actually went up to New England for a workout. New England has a big connection with Kirk Ferentz and the University of Iowa. Coach Ferentz has a Belichick connection, and I actually thought they were going to draft me coming out of Iowa. So that when I got cut by Carolina, they brought me up for a workout. They wanted me to stay in New England until Friday. They're going to supposedly sign me for the game. Well, while I was sitting there waiting, Arizona Cardinals called me and offered me a job on the spot without having to try out or work out or anything like that. So I just had to tell New England, I got to go take a job where I can get it. Finished out the year down in Arizona. I actually lived with Kevin Cobb and his wife.
Really? The legend Kevin Cobb.
The legend Kevin Cobb. Yeah, my old buddy from the Eagles. Yep, he was down in Arizona at that time, and I shacked up in their basement, and we had a good old time for about 3 or 4 months. And that March, I came back home. We started building a house in my hometown, and I just pretty much thought my career was going to be done. And John Harbaugh called me. He was sitting at Disney World by a swimming pool, him and his wife and daughter, and he told me that the Ravens were going to win a Super Bowl the following year, and he wanted me to be a part of it because their special teams were not very good. And so they brought in some great players, Corey Graham, Brendan Bendejo, myself, a few guys that are really Jacoby Jones. Yeah. It was just an incredible, they brought in 4 or 5 guys that were just kind of career special teams guys at that point. Although Corey Graham ended up playing a big role in our defense and had a good career after that. And just typical John Harbaugh, just such a visionary, such a leader. But I always tell people it's just crazy. I mean, he literally on that phone call said, "We're going to win the Super Bowl, and I want you to be a part of it." And that's exactly
is not for the other teams that have called you, like you said, New England and Arizona and you're in Jacksonville. When they called you up, have any of them ever said that?
No, John's just a different type of guy. I mean, but we had a great relationship. I always tell everybody, John Harbaugh reminds me of my father. John Harbaugh rode my ass. I mean, he really did. I mean, he had high expectations for me as a young player at Philadelphia. I mean, almost, John can get pretty personal, and it was good. It was good for me though. I'd grown up in that environment. My dad was not a guy that was all the time friendly. He had high expectations for me. He wanted to push me. He wanted me to, do the right things. And often as a young fella, you don't always want to do the stuff, and you don't want to work hard, and you want to do this or that. But, so I was very appreciative of the leadership that John had with me, and then the ultimate relationship and respect that we earned for each other over time. And so the conversations I had with Coach Harbaugh, I mean, heck, I sat up in first class with him that whole season on our flights, and it was probably more like a coach and coach relationship than player coach, but it was just a great experience.
That's awesome. What was that mindset going into that season where like Harbaugh already has as the long-term goal? How did they kind of like get the team to buy in so that like the goal didn't falter the whole year?
I had heard a lot about the Ravens culture, but until you're there, I'd been on a few other just winning cultures, and that's what Baltimore has. I mean, they expect to win. The players expect to be tough. They're going to play great defense. They're going to know what they're doing. They're going to put in the time. I mean, those are football junkies there. When you had guys like Ray Lewis, they reminded me a lot of the Brian Dawkins types. I mean, they did not accept people that were going to be, looking to party and do all this type of stuff. I mean, it was all football. Those guys put in tons of time. I mean, they were football junkies. And if you weren't that, then you didn't fit into the Ravens locker room. And so John was the perfect fit. And, I think he had to tread lightly and find his way to be the leader that John wants to be. For guys like Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and such a strong locker room. I give John a lot of credit. This is much before I got there, for him to be able to go into there and be the type of leader he is to those guys, because those guys were so ingrained and entrenched in the leadership and who the Ravens were. I give John a lot of credit for him to be able to go there, to take that over, and then ultimately take them to the top and win a Super Bowl. And just still doing it today. He's just he's a tremendous leader.
Yeah. So I have a question. So fast forward to the game against Denver. Did you feel like when did you feel at that point that you were out of it? And then can you recap the Mile High Miracle from what you were seeing?
That team that year, I don't even remember it. Early in the year, we got destroyed down at Houston. I think right before our bye week. I mean, we got beat by like 30 points. And the one thing I remember, Ray Lewis was, that he knew he was retiring after that year. He was just really big the whole year to keeping us focused on getting hot and playing good football when it was going to be important. And he believed that we had to get on a roll, and so did John. Coach Harbaugh was talking about the same thing, that we were going to have our ups and downs, and we got destroyed in Houston, but we are going to win a Super Bowl by playing our best ball, week 14, 15, 16, and it's got to be a steady escalation from there. And so we always had our mind, our goals set on that, and that's what we talked about, and that's exactly what happened. Those guys did a great job of, getting in Joe Flacco's head. Hey Joe, you're great. All we need you to do is be the best Joe Flacco you can be. Week 17, week 18, week 19. When we need it, and that's when it's got to happen, and that's what we did. And so, I think we just had a mindset that we just were gonna give it our all, and it didn't. We had ups and downs even through the playoffs, but when the offense needed to pick up, Jacoby Jones would return a punt return for a touchdown. When the defense was playing bad, and Ray Lewis was getting torched by some tight ends at that point in his career, Joe Flacco throws 3 touchdowns, and that's how you win a Super Bowl. I mean, it comes through all phases, and the leadership that we had on that team that year knew that, and that's what we focused on, and it was a lot of fun being part of it.
And then fast forward to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, right? It was in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Was there any jitters for you? Like, you're a veteran in the league, but this is the biggest game you've been in. Did it kind of hit? When did it hit you? Like, all right, this is real.
I've always kind of taken the mindset. I mean, I got nervous before every football game I ever played. Ever since junior tackle all the way till the Super Bowl. But that game didn't feel any different to me because I always focused on, the preparation. If I had a great week of preparation, if I did what I know I needed to do to get ready for a football game, I knew I could live with any outcome that was going to happen in that game. As long as I gave my best effort in the game. That was the one thing that was, you get to the NFL and sometimes you find out even your best effort sometimes isn't as good as some great plays by some incredible athletes. And, that was a tough thing to deal with. But that Super Bowl week was just a great experience. I really tried to focus in on exactly what I had known my whole career, what I knew worked, what I knew got me ready to play football games. And, I felt like I was nervous, but I felt like just a sense of ease and excitement for that game because, hey, this was like my whole 22 years of football. I had prepared for this game. Yep. And I'm going to, get ready the best I know. I'm going to go out and block, tackle, and do all the things that I prepared 22 years for. And I hope we win. And lo and behold, we did. And great experience. I mean, you wouldn't believe the people, I got to take my college coach to the game, my high school coach, my parents, we had bus loads of people that came down from Byron, drove down in RVs, and my brother and his college buddies, they got in more trouble, and I think they're still in jail down there. I'm not mailing them out, but I mean, it was just it was a lot of fun, and just a lot of great stories came out of that week. But I was down there working. I had to let everybody, they know that. I mean, my family and friends had followed my career for a long time, and I wasn't going out to dinner. I wasn't having a beer. I wasn't doing any of that type of stuff till the game was over. And fortunately for us, we won, and we went and had plenty of fun after that game.
Who cut the power?
Roger Goodell. What are you talking about?
What was your reaction when that happened?
I don't think that. They say Roger Goodell knew we had all the old guys, and Ray Lewis would stiffen up, and Ed Reed would stiffen up, and I don't think they were too worried about me. But I stiffened up. We spent 35 minutes trying to stretch and stay warmed up. And I tell you what, I went up to Coach Harbaugh one time while that was going on. I go, "What are they telling you?" And he told me that they told him that they didn't know if they were going to get these lights back on. And I said, "Well, what do we got to do?" And he's just like, "I don't know. We ain't playing if you can't turn the lights on." It was just crazy.
You guys were ahead at the time. Were they just call it?
Call a game? I doubt it. I think all those guys that had money on the game.
It probably would have been too. The over's definitely not hitting. That's interesting. And then so fast forward, you win the game, Super Bowl. What's the parade like? I'm sure all your family traveled from New Orleans to Baltimore for the parade.
No, they did not.
Really?
I can't remember if the parade was. I think it was really.
I remember I was because I'm from Baltimore, so I remember I had a test that day and I couldn't go, and half my class went. I remember the parade. It was during the week. I think it was on Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, the parade was incredible. Trying to get everybody down to New Orleans for the Super Bowl, that was the logistical nightmare. And so a lot of people had traveled and had to go to this airport to fly in to here, and then you had to fly. So a lot of my family and my wife, she went back home with all the kids. Actually, my son, who's now 13 years old, was like 5, and Ed Reed's son was 5, and basically tackled him right before the game out on the Saturday walkthrough where the family were, and broke his foot.
Ed Reed or Ed Reed's son?
Ed Reed's son broke my son.
Him for a couple of years. I'm scouting him now.
He's probably a good football player, but it was just an accident. It was no big deal.
His foot?
He broke his foot, and so my wife's calling me Saturday night before the Super Bowl saying, "I think he's really hurt, and what should I do?" And I'm like, "Tell him to suck it up. I don't want to hear about." Well, he did. We didn't take him to the doctor down in New Orleans or nothing. But about finally got him home, and 3 or 4 days after the Super Bowl, his foot was still killing him. It was huge. Took him in there, and he had 4 broken bones. So
unbelievable.
it was just kind of crazy. But yeah, it's just lot going on, and I'm just like, hey, I got to play a football game tomorrow, honey. Can you talk to somebody else about this? I don't know what to do.
Maybe he turned out the lights because his foot was killing him. He said, I want to go home. Maybe he cut the power.
He wasn't at the game.
Okay.
I didn't bring any of the kids into the game.
Interesting.
You get 16 tickets. At that point, we had 4 kids. So we had one more that came later. But, I wanted to share that moment with some adults that, would remember it. No, so none of my kids were at the game. We had a nanny that was watching them back at the hotel, and of course, one of them had a broken foot.
That's wild. And then, so did Harbaugh try to convince you to come back for another year?
Yeah, I was. Baltimore wanted to bring me back, but Ed was retiring. I had for a couple of years started having some like hip pains, and that last season in Baltimore, I went and saw a specialist, and basically I had almost like degenerative hip disease, from years and years of grinding on the hips. And I was more than likely going to have to go get instead of doing a full-blown surgery to fix it, I was going to go get my hip, what they call a hip shaved, where they kind of shave off some of the bone spurs or whatever fragments that are in there. Well, it was like a 6-month recovery time. And so, once kind of had the conversation with John, absolutely, we got, a 1-year contract waiting for you. But with Ed retiring, they knew that they were going to go into the draft and probably, bring in a rookie or 2 at the safety position and a free agent. At that point, you're a 9-year vet. And, the year before when John called, it was like, hey, I want you to come down to Baltimore on it's a 1-year contract. It is what it is at that point in your career, but you're my guy and you're going to be on the roster. But year 9, that's part of, the respect I have for John. He wasn't able to give me pretty much that same guarantee. And he's, said, absolutely love to sign you and bring you here, but there's a very good chance that, we have to make a late roster cut and you're probably one of the last ones on the roster. And then you're going to be jumping around from team to team like you did in year 7. And my wife was going to be giving birth to our last son in September. And so we would have moved to Baltimore and rented a house, and she would have gave birth, and we got the kids in school. And then I would have been possibly, who knows, doing what. So I said, you know what? I'm going to be like Ray Lewis, and I'm going to throw the deuces up, and I'm out of here. See you. Thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I just have one last question for you. So I saw it from an article from a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if you're still doing it now. After you retired, you got into the meat industry. Could you talk about that a little bit? I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, I started a mobile meat market. I mean, when I was out in Philly and Baltimore and those big cities, I saw a lot of the food vendors, going mobile. Out here in the Midwest, we have a lot of meat lockers, custom butchers and stuff like that. A lot of them have gone out of business. And so just kind of, I was a business major at Iowa, and I kind of always had like an entrepreneurial spirit. So it was my opportunity. As soon as the Super Bowl was over, I bought this trailer for like $100,000 and decked it out with all these meat display cases. And we found like 5 different stops to go, and we'd open up, and it did really well. It was a lot of work. It was like running a restaurant. I learned a lot. I had to learn how to use QuickBooks for my accounting. I did payroll, and we sold a ton of meat, and I met a lot of people back in the area where I grew up, and a lot of people got to come and say hello because of my football career and all that type of stuff. And a lot of fun. I don't do it anymore. I sold the meat wagon to some meat locker up in Wisconsin. They're using it. My picture's still on it, I heard.
Really?
Yeah, I had a picture.
Is it similar to like in Seinfeld when George was running around in John Voight's car? Hey, this is Sean Considine's meat mobile.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't think that's going to get you very far these days.